Right on, bro.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Nonsense FC, episode 2. Once again with my co-host Eric Cruz. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing good, man. I'm kind on vacation tomorrow, so this is gonna be the last party before the vacation. Maybe we'll get one,
Yes, sir. We're gonna try to squeeze
party. And how you doing, bro?
this potty in. I'm doing all right. I could be better, but can't complain. There's always soccer to watch. So
There
how about you?
was. Did you happen to watch the CONCACAF Champions League? It was actually a very good game, to be honest. It was
I
very entertaining.
I feel like they were playing the final.
Almost, right?
Yeah, it
But
was like every
but you know,
50 ball challenge was like I have to win it.
and they were fouling the hell out of each other, but they were fighting for the ball. Maybe go over there. I feel like Tigres started off on the wrong foot and then like turned it around. Gignac had so many opportunities to score. Um, Diego Lanes didn't play for the whole game. Played the last 5 minutes. Why are they even paying that man? I don't. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about in that game itself.
Yeah,
But I know that's not the topic of discussion today. It just so happened that we both caught the game.
yeah, and just to kind of give you my little recap, my opinion on the game. I thought it was a very
Which
good
uh,
game.
which the game ended 2-1. Tigres won against Leon, but they still need to go back to Leon. Just a little info for the viewers.
Yeah, so definitely the first leg, very interesting. They still have to go to Leon. Both teams are still fighting to qualify into the play-in tournament for the playoffs in Liga MX. So that being
Which
said,
yeah, which I was gonna say. I want to say they're in the playoffs. They just have to play the knockout round before the other round, right? So it's like the first four are guaranteed, and then like the next eight have to play like a knockout, and then they go in kind of like wild card for the NFL, right? Like you're in the
yeah,
playoffs, but you're playing a wild card game, which they're I feel like they're all wild cards. It's do or die in the playoffs anyway. But
yeah, which makes. I mean, there's a lot that I would like to talk about. We don't have that much time today, but that's why I'm pro relegation.
yeah, me too.
Because having a 16 team tournament where 12 teams make the playoffs, like, all
It
right,
makes
well,
no sense.
if for example, Pumas was having a horrible season and now they're going to qualify, Tigres was having a bad start. They went through now on their third coach, which is, typical of Liga MX to do, but it just doesn't benefit you long term and with your federation and your national team, which is today's actual topic.
Yes, I would say, you know what it doesn't do? It doesn't keep you competitive in longevity. Like the results are like, let's stay competitive now. Who cares about the future? Because in the future we'll figure it out. But like when there's relegation involved, you're like, no, we have to stay competitive for the foreseeable future, for the long term, the foreseeable, because we can't risk going down the league, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, but it does let's transition into the main focus of today, which if you want to introduce.
Yeah. So good thing you have your USA background up there now. Um, US Soccer has now appointed their technical director, Matt Kroger.
Crocker.
Crocker.
You never played at Crocker Fields in San Francisco or what?
Those were my field state cup champions there, baby.
Matt
Um,
Crocker, a Welshman.
Welshman with little to no resume. Um,
I just went into his background actually, and he has a very interesting background. I know it's probably not what I would have preferred for the director of soccer for the U.S. Soccer Federation, but he actually kind of has interesting resume. That makes sense.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Yeah, yeah. Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'll just say this before you go and break it down. But I said little to no resume because it's short.
Yeah,
There's
it's very short. It's very
there's not
short. Yep.
much in there. You have to go into detail and see what he's done, how he's done it, how his ideas kind of work, where he's been at.
I will
Uh,
say though, I will say he probably has an act for picking out talent though. I will say that.
I'm looking at this very positive, and I'll go after you, but go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to break down he's been at four different positions. So he started with Cardiff, which if people don't know, I think Cardiff, if I'm not mistaken, Cardiff is a city in Wales,
Hmm.
and I'm assuming they have a team. So he was a development coach there. Then he was an academy coach for Southampton. If you don't know, Southampton is bottom of the league right now in the Premier League, which is not a good
Fighting
thing.
relegation.
But I'm almost certain they're going down. Like there's no I see very little hope for Southampton right now. Then he was head of youth teams for England for about 6 years. Uh, and then he was the head of football operations back at Southampton. Um, under his tenure, though, at Southampton, he had players debut, which I'll give you some good names. Probably one of my, I wouldn't say one of my favorite players but I just think he was one of the most underrated players, even though
Say
soccer
it.
wasn't really,
Say
you
it.
know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Huh? A man that knows Wales, golf, and soccer in that order.
Hey, by the way, is being tempted to come out of retirement to play for Wrexham next season.
Is for Wrexham?
Yeah. And if for those, sorry, we're going a little bit off topic. For those who don't know about Wrexham FC, go on Hulu.
Matt Reynolds. Who? If
Ryan
you guys,
Reynolds.
oh,
Ryan.
Ryan Reynolds. If you guys don't know who he is, go watch Deadpool. um, but yeah, I haven't seen the show actually. But the player that we're talking about is actually Gareth Bale. Who, if you don't know about Gareth Bale, you probably don't know much about soccer. But
Just stop
Gareth
watching our
Bale,
show.
yeah, stop watching our show. But as you know, 4 time Champions League winner with Real Madrid. Debuted with Southampton and then Tottenham picked them up afterwards. Uh, I guess Luke Shaw also came up in Southampton. I didn't know that. There's another guy that they mentioned who I think is a forward for Southampton currently. And then in his tenure as the head of youth teams in England, he actually was responsible for like the debut of Phil Foden, which is an amazing player, probably one of my favorite players in the Premier League right now. Jadon Sancho, who was killing it, Borussia Dortmund, probably not killing it anymore at Manchester United. But I'm hoping he turns things around. Emmett Smith Rowe, who I actually like for Arsenal. He's a very good player. I just think they brought on so much talent onto that team that he just kind of fell down the pecking order. But so he has a knack to pick out very quality players. Um, Unfortunately, Southampton isn't doing so well right now. So he's leaving in their worst moment. But it seems like there's a glimmer of hope there. Maybe he's not the long term director that I would have preferred and with the vision, but I think he knows talent and he can spot talent and can move them up to where they really need to be, right? So that's I would say that is the positive. That's the silver lining of all
Yeah,
this.
and you mentioned something very important, which is you wouldn't, pick someone like Matt to be a technical director, but he's only had technical director jobs, academy positions. Um, so he's not your typical ex-player who wants this role to, build his resume and help his country in the foreseeable future. Now, with that being said, what is the future? Um, I think for me, he covers all of the boxes in the future with the U.S. Youth system. It's not all up to him because one, we don't have a relegation. MLS Next Pro is very new. So him coming in, implementing some of his ideas that he, took to FA, is going to be very good. But at the end of the day, we're looking at what the national team is doing, Gold Cup, Copa America, and ultimately 2026 World Cup, where
And
I go
no, go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead, go ahead. No, no, go ahead, go ahead, go
Oh,
ahead.
I think if he can delegate and appoint a general manager, it's going to be a lot easier for him to focus on bringing in those talented youth players, letting them break into first team play. And in the next 3 years, the 18-year-olds are going to be 2021, and you have those young players for 2030 World Cup. And that's the future that I look at. But I'm not too sure if every American is on board with 8 years from now. I think they want
Results now.
results
Yeah.
now, which is reasonable.
Which is reasonable, but for a soccer federation that isn't so recognized, I would say probably that's probably the one best terms I can use. Like they're not a powerhouse like Brazil, Germany, Argentina, um, England. You know that just every year they produce talent, they produce players, and you're like, well, these guys should be competing at the highest level, right? USA hasn't been known for that, right? So I think this is the man who honestly I feel like the US is getting an influx of talent currently, right? Like I feel like we're attracting talent and we're finally at the point where we're like, well, out of all this talent, who do we bring on, right? Like I think that's the problem that the US has right now. We're like, damn, we got a lot of good players. Who do we choose? What do we do, right? And I think this man might know exactly what to do. I think this might be his specialty. Now, if USA was a team like Brazil where we're like, we know who the talent is and we know exactly who needs to be on this team and how do we get the players that we have, the top level players to perform and go out and win us the World Cup, I think we need a different director. But I think for the situation that we're in, I think he might be the exact perfect candidate. And because our team is so young and full of talent, right? Which is something he's dealt with, right? He's dealt with all these teams where he got this young talent coming up, and he's appointed coaches that have utilized these players to to give them results. And look where these players ended up. They're top level players that like Gareth Bale won the Champions League multiple times with Real Madrid. Phil Foden is killing it at Man City. Luke Shaw, I think he's amazing at Manchester United. Probably one of the most dependable players on that team. So
If he didn't break his leg, I think he'd be
yeah,
elite,
yeah, he
and he's still
probably
elite.
be, and he still is. Yeah, he still is. But what I'm saying is, he knows he knows how to nurture the talent and like say, this is your moment to shine. This is the coach that's gonna get him to shine. Like I think he and what you said about him not being a player, I think his mind is like he's not thinking of things as a player. He's thinking about like what's best for my team, kind of what's
And
best for the
it's kind of like what I told you in the last episode. I think you'd be a good coach because you don't
we
think
didn't.
so much as a player. You're thinking about the team. Like if I told you, give me your best 11, you'd take yourself out of that 11, even though you're a good player, to see your team win, right?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
So
Yeah, like I won't let my ego get in the way.
yeah, and I think that's a great thing that Matt brings to the table. He's like federation oriented, team oriented, and you mentioned a good thing about the current players, right? So we have current, well, not we, but you guys have current players
You're a man team
that,
too, bro.
well, maybe we'll see June 15th. We'll see to June 15th, but there's a lot of players playing abroad right now. You have Ricardo Pepi killing it. His team's going to relegate. Where does he go next? Does Matt
Which
have some type of influence with those connections? You know,
Yeah,
do,
which is another thing. Yeah, that might be something that he has. He has some leverage and he can make a few
yeah,
calls and say like, I think you should go here. This is gonna develop you the best.
yeah. Because this week's rumor was that since they're gonna relegate, Crystal Palace was looking into bringing him on.
Mm-mm.
Is it a good thing to get
I
him?
like Crystal Palace.
Crystal
Crystal
Palace is
Palace
good.
has a they're a good team.
They're mid-level, kind of
They
sometimes
did,
fight
but
relegation.
they debut a lot of young players on the team,
Yeah.
which I
So
love.
so I think that his network spider web is very, very good. Um, However, one important thing, and I don't know what this meant during their press conference, but effectively starts August 2nd, which
But
I'm assuming we don't
he's
have a
gonna finish the
coach for the Gold Cup.
oh I see what you're saying. No, from what I understood in the press release is that they have an agreement with Southampton though, that he can do some work for the US, mainly finding a coach, and he's gonna finish his season with Southampton because they are fighting
Yeah,
relegation, and probably got a whole bunch of other things they got to worry about. So I think that's why he's on to August.
but I still think
Well, he find a coach.
Southampton
Yeah,
Southampton is his priority. They're
yeah,
saying
probably.
well, not his priority, but like, let me finish my job. Let me finish my job
Yeah,
here,
kind of.
and then move on. But August 2nd is after a Gold Cup.
Yeah, which is not good for the U.S. I think
Not like
if you're thinking about what are they going to appoint somebody before then? I will say this though, I think there must be a short list for the head coach position, and he's probably well aware of who's on that short list.
well because he wanted to bring Jesse March into Southampton.
Southampton, I'm
I
assuming
I
yeah,
think
he
he's
has eyes for him.
top three candidate to take over the team. And I don't know how you feel about that.
I understand that like you might want an American coach. Um, I personally think he's a little too young. Um, experience wise, I don't think he has enough. I know he managed Leeds, but he didn't do a good job. I mean, they're still fighting relegation. And
I,
he didn't bring him up into the Premier League. I'll tell you that. So his tenure with the team was very short.
but
Um,
but then again, he didn't get a chance to utilize the players that he brought in after the January transfer window.
he didn't. He didn't.
And look what Garcia is doing right now. Like, they're literally fighting relegation. So
Yeah,
and another thing is, yes, we would like a European coach or a big name, like, for example, just throwing it out there, at least
we keep saying,
Luis
oh, we keep saying
Enrique to a
Henri.
national
We
team.
agreed on Henri. Let's just say Henri for sakes, right?
Correct.
Like,
Okay.
yeah, like I would love him, but only because I feel like he's been in these players' shoes and he knows what it's like to be a young talent, and this is a young team. Like, I think he has the best insight on how to guide him into becoming well quality players. Because some of the players on the team right now, I feel like they're very, very great prospects. I think the world is attainable for them. But if they don't have the right guidance, it's not gonna. They can become the next Freddie Adu, right? Like, you were great, and then you weren't great the next moment. So I think who you choose right now is really, really important.
I think Titi Henry would be my number one choice because, one, he's already been in a locker room similar with a golden era team in Belgium.
Yes.
I mean, he was there as an assistant coach for 5+ years. He also played in the MLS at Red Bulls, which has a connection to Europe. We all know that. And I think he follows the MLS because I mean, I don't know for sure, but I've heard him say in plenty of interviews that he lives part-time in New York.
Which would make sense.
It makes sense because he works for CBS. He does all of their Champions League, Europa League stuff. So I would pick him as my number one candidate. I think being at Barcelona under different managers that play a similar style of play that fit the group the US has now, it would be perfect. Jesse March has European experience and he's American, but we're expecting this to go beyond 2026. Like, just because you're hosting doesn't mean you have to win it.
And it's I honestly I don't feel like it's realistic to say that the US is like a top contender to win the World Cup. You know what I mean? Like I keep saying I think a semifinal appearance would be like that's perfect for the US. That would be like the the wish, right? But I prefer that they make it into the quarterfinals and they give me a hell of a game in the quarterfinals. That's I think the bare minimum. But an appearance in the semifinals would be like, damn, these boys really pulled it out.
See, I I don't dislike the US, but como dicen, ni de aquí ni de allá. I'm not Mexican, I'm not American enough. So you just choose at the end of the day, right? I chose
Yeah.
Mexico, but I like the US. I they got to a Confederations final in 2009, which they could have won. 2002, they eliminate Mexico, get into quarters. If they pass quarters, they potentially can, play, I think it was South Korea.
Which would have been not a difficult ask.
Yeah, not a difficult ask. And then you get into the final against Brazil. So, like, those scenarios give me hope that in 2026 they can finally break a barrier, get into semis. Um, you know, I am more realistic of the US breaking that barrier and not Mexico, because we all know Mexico rotates coaches, rotates presidents. They just announced Duilio Davino, which is the next player, as their GM, I believe. So, just to stay on US for today. Um, Speaking of abroad, Titi Henry playing in the MLS. Do you think that the US soccer is at the level they think they are in general, international and domestic?
And no, I would say no. And I think we've had this conversation multiple times where I feel like what I need from the US on the international, let's just say international level, when I watch them play, I don't feel like they assert themselves as a dominant team. You know what I mean? And you get that from other teams. Like if you're playing Spain, you're playing Germany, you're playing Italy, you're playing Portugal, you're playing Brazil, you're playing Argentina. They assert themselves as a dominant team, meaning they manage the game. You're playing at their tempo. You're playing at their rhythm. And the US does not play in that fashion.
That's a good point that you bring up, because in Matt's conference today, he spoke about the last World Cup and how the U.S. didn't know how to manage certain situations in different games. For an example, against England, I believe he said that they wanted to match a pace that they weren't at, and then against Holland, they wanted to outpace but didn't have
The
uh,
pace.
the mentality or the pace to do it. So I think it's a good thing that he's there. Like, this is what I want from U15s to the big leagues, and then you start implementing that in MLS next with different coaching courses
Yeah,
and things
because
of that nature.
it has to start with the youth, right? And so when the youth learn it, once they come of age, right, and they're playing, they make their debuts and they're playing at the top in the MLS or wherever it may be, they come in without foundation. Like I know how to play at this tempo, I know how to play at that tempo. I know what you want from me from a press. I know what you want from me when you want me to park the bus. And
I mean,
I don't
it's as simple as your freaking center back Aaron long ass knowing how to play with his feet.
or knowing when to go wide, like knowing when to spread the field, knowing when to pinch in, it's things like that. Which I don't know why some of these players don't know it, right? You would assume that they've been taught these things. But yes, so that going back to the what I think about the US on the international stage, I think there's a lot for them to still learn. I definitely don't think they don't have the experience like a veteran does on like let me ice the game right now. Like, this team is attacking us crazy. We need to ice the game, put a break on it. So, like let's cause fouls just to stop the rhythm of the game. Or let's do this, or let's pick up the rhythm right now. Like they look like they're a little tired, right? I don't think they have that, and they don't have that experience as a team, mainly because they're young, right?
Yeah,
Then you bring in a coach like you don't have to tell me his name again because I always get it mixed up. Greg
Berhalter.
Berhalter, which makes these poor decisions in player selection, and
Or
it
no,
just
or no decisions during the game.
and no exactly right. And so I think as a coach, that kind of demoralizes you a little bit as a player because you're like, fuck, I don't know what to do in the goddamn game. And the coach don't even know what to do, right? What do we do, right? You're like, I depend on the coach to give me the idea and I go out and I perform the idea, right? And I think Burrow Harter didn't have that. He didn't have the idea. And so the players are kind of have you ever actually speaking about that? You played, right? And I played on teams where you're like, I have no confidence in this coach. And then it shows on the field. You're like, I feel like yeah, we have a great team out here, but like because we don't have a clear idea of how to play, we just underperform every time. And that's what I saw in the US on the international stage at least. I don't know what you if you agree, disagree.
No, I mean I agree. Like I'm thinking about my youth days now, and I'm like, nah, I really didn't like. Nah, I mean I was on two state co-winning teams, so
Yeah, so I feel like you had a coach that probably like had a clear idea of how he wanted you guys to play and perform, and you guys went out and you did that, right? And it
yeah.
gives as a player that gives you a little confidence as well. Kind of like I go like to Ancelotti, right? Like he might I think it's widely known that he might not be the most idealistic coach or whatever, but the players have a sense of respect and admiration to him that they whatever he says they do it right, and they just believe that things will work out how he's telling them it will,
Well, I mean,
and
how
that's
do you not listen to a coach that's won 4
everything,
champions?
right?
Yeah,
Exactly. So you give into it, and you're like, what? He got to know what he's talking about,
he
right?
knows. Yeah,
But if you find a coach that has little to none experience or very minimal experience, and then he's telling you do this, or he doesn't tell you anything at all, your confidence kind of goes down. Probably not consciously, but subconsciously, you're like, damn, I don't, like this team is giving us a run for our money. I don't really know what to do. I'm kind of stuck with ideas. I don't know what to do, and the coach is not really helping you. So you kind of, you're stuck.
here's why I don't think Titi gets the job, and it's because we don't have any tape on what he's been doing in the last few years. Like he was an assistant coach, but how much did he have in effect in players? Like, yeah,
On
you can
that
be there in
team.
training, you can be there communicating, but was it your idea?
Yeah, like
Right?
how much did you influence Roberto Was it Roberto Mancini? No, what's his name? Roberto something
Martinez.
Martinez, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like how
I
much
thought
did
he
you
was a dumb
influence
coach.
his thought, his idea, his tactics, and what are your own? Right?
Yeah, yeah. What would you have done differently? I guess that's the question that you posed to him in the interviews, right? It's like this is what he went out with. What did you see differently? What would you have done differently? And what do you do or whatever? But
Which
going back,
always takes me back to you don't really need someone with the resume like Barcelona, Tottenham champions, Man City champion. Like I'm talking about Pep. Anyways,
yeah,
you don't need that because I mean Scaloni didn't have any of that. I mean, obviously he had great superstars, but if you talk to him, if you get a chance to interview him, like my first question would be, you already had everything. How did you tie it together? Were your tactics that much different to what they were already doing? Or did you just tweak and adjust certain things or bring in different players? Like what was it? And I think that's why you don't need a
yeah,
great
I agree with.
resume.
Yeah, you don't necessarily. I think honestly, I think you need a
And
great mind.
plus going back to European coaches and American players, they don't even give us PT over there.
Not all of us, but I will say some of them do. Like McKinney played today, Aronson played today with Leeds. I saw him play. Lucas de la Torre is like a was a starter for
Celta.
Celta.
I mean, there's playing time, there's significant minutes being handed to these players,
yeah, and which is weird. Like Reyna's another player that like doesn't get too much PT time, but when he does, he scores every single time. Not probably not every
but
single time, but
that
every
just
time I see.
it just speaks volume on the player, not really like what like okay, what would he do if he had 90 minutes? Oh yeah, he's probably gonna do the same thing.
Yeah, but why doesn't he? Why isn't he in the game? Yeah, it's very weird things, And unless you're on the team and you know the ins and outs, it's hard to really understand all the decision making. But going back to your topic about what about the domestic level of play, and this is something that bothers me a lot about the MLS. I definitely think that the MLS level of play is not great. One defensively is trash. If you watch the first 2 weeks of MLS soccer, there was like two goals where they just like passed the ball back to the forward, which made no sense. I've never done it in my damn life. I don't know why they would do it as professionals, but I think there's a lot of old players in the league that are like, man, you've been in the league for like 10, 15 years, and like, okay, you're an established player in the league, but like, do I really need you on this team? Kind of like, I I would love to see a lot more youth integration, a lot more charismatic players, a lot more talented players, and then fundamental players. I think I would say that's my word to the league. It's a lot of fundamental players, which fundamentally they're not that great either. Though, if you see a lot of them, they lack quality under pressure. But
And I
I,
think another thing is that the US sends offensive players abroad when before it was defensive. Onyewu played at AC Milan, DeMarcus Beasley played at Man City. It's like you were working from the back up, and now you're trying to, send offensive players. You got them there, but like, what about Zimmerman? What about Aaron Long? You guys keep bringing them onto the U.S. national team, and they don't produce anything.
yeah,
So I think MLS needs to focus a lot on,
defense.
yeah, basically defense. I know they want to keep their MLS American fan base entertained with these high scoring goals and games, I should say. But
But I would say, as a soccer fan, I would much rather see a player that's like very good defensively than like all these goals that are like, damn, that guy was doing. What kind of mistake was that? Like, how do you make that mistake in a game? You know what I mean? Um,
but also we're fans of the game, and we've been fans for a long time, or we don't mind watching these games, you know, criticizing or giving our opinion on the style of play, how slow it is, or how back and forth it is, too direct, or whatever the case may be. Like we don't have that issue, right? I think the issue is that the soccer is so new that they're trying to fight to be the number one sport, behind uh baseball, basketball, and football, which I think football has gone a lot, downhill with all the rules now. MLB and NBA, it is what it is, but the US is trying to attract different audiences, create a fan base, and it's affecting the play.
yeah, but you can't do it at the expense of like talent. I would say, like, you can't say like,
Yeah,
all right, let's get like the worst defense so that people score goals. You know what I mean?
because I mean, if you watch highlights on MLS next tournaments or games or whatever, even USA or US Open Cup, right? USL or US Open Cup, they show you highlights of the offensive part of the game, right? Obviously, that's what a highlight is, but why don't you show, I don't even know these defenders' name, but like for example, like Puyol making a great sliding tackle against Ronaldo at the Camp Nou in the 90th minute. You want
Oh
to
yeah,
watch
like
that.
like yeah, like man, like really smart defensive plays, kind of. Like I'll tell you one that comes to mind to me. Like this is something that probably nobody. I think you had to really love the game to understand like how important of a player it was. I remember the first time seeing Fede Valverde played for Real Madrid in a final against Atletico Madrid. It's the last minute of the game, and Atletico Madrid has a breakaway, one-on-one with the goalie. Somehow Fede catches up and just slide tackles a guy from behind. Automatic red card, right? But Diego
Smartest play you can
Simeone,
make.
smartest play, he was like, yeah, it was a foul, like put the smartest guy on the field because he knew that if they scored the goal, the game's over. But
Yep.
if I get a red card, we go to extra time. And I was like, we win the game in extra time. You have to be one of the smartest players on the field to understand, like, yes, I'm gonna get a red for this, but this is a necessary red at this point.
Yeah, where when you compare it to an MLS slide tackle, it's usually because they're out of position.
Yeah,
Or they made a mistake where they have to go track back, pull a jersey, slide tackle or whatever. But that I'm gonna agree with you. I'm not gonna go into the level of play that the US soccer is at. Are they far behind? No. But if people think like, yeah, US soccer is better than Liga MX, no,
no,
that's
I
not the
wouldn't.
case. Even
I would, I
even
would.
even even if the final is it's gonna be MX versus MLS. Even if, for example, I want it to be LAFC Tigres, if LAFC gets a W against Tigres, like who cares?
I don't think it doesn't solidify that the MLS is better
Yeah.
than Liga MX. It only solidifies that LAFC is probably one of the best teams in the MLS by far. But I tell you this, I don't think they have what it takes to win the game because their midfield is just lacks talent with Kellen Acosta. That midfield is trash. But Vela is probably the superstar on that team who, if he gets the ball where it needs to be, he might score. He's like a lethal striker.
And then
So
you have Chalina back there. That's probably the smartest move that an MLS team has ever made in their franchise history is bringing in a
top level
defender.
defender,
Yeah,
Chiellini, or
yeah.
who you talking? Who you say?
Chiellini.
Chiellini. Yeah, I love that guy. That guy's amazing when he
He's
played
so
at Juventus.
smart. He's so
The
smart.
smartest player. Remember when he pulled down Saka in the final of the
Yep.
Euro?
Yep.
Smartest player ever, right? Like those are the defensive players. Yeah, you get a lot of lip from them, but they're the plays that are necessary. And only a really smart defender will be like, "Well, I had to do it. Give
And
me the yellow."
if he's playing at a top level in the MLS, like that tells you a lot from your defenders. And if you're an American fan, I'd be very, very nervous from our future. But to close out the podcast, because this was more about the sporting
USA
director,
soccer.
USA Soccer sporting director. What what do you want to see happen from Matt, and what do you want to see happen from the team for the rest of the year? Because it looks like you're going to be with Anthony Hudson to close out 2023.
At this point, I would hope that he appoints the proper coach. I think that's the most important thing. And then we have a vision going into the World Cup. Like I don't want to see the same old players being brought on. Like for instance, the players that were brought on for the friendly against Mexico. Like I don't want to see that no more. Like if you're gonna bring on players, I want to see the talent that you think these are the players that might break into the team. I don't know yet, but these are the players that I want to see play and have a vision of like, all right, if you're not gonna make this team 4 years from now, I think you might make the team, and so I need to see you now, right? But I definitely want to see the vision for the future. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. Not to go too much into detail, I would like for him to delegate, hire a GM, hire a coach that fits in with these group of players, and I don't see favorable results for them to close out the year. But as long as there's a clear team function, I think you guys should be good.
Well, there it is, ladies and gents. Podcast number 2.
Podcast number 2, we try to get in for you guys. Hope you guys liked it. Give us some feedback.
Watch Man City versus Arsenal tomorrow. The league depends on it.
Oh,
That's all
yes,
I gotta
sir.
say.
Yes, sir.